Hi everyone, my name is Alan Lok and I hope you can see my PPT screen right now. Okay, this is going to be a bit technically new to me because I'm also trying to do some live polling later on, but let's see how it goes. Okay, let me go through my personal facts in brief, and as Jeff has already given a very good introduction to where I'm coming from. There are just some additional pointers that I hope to point out so that to give you all a good understanding of my background and from what perspective I'm coming from. In fact, my first job was actually the Singapore Armed Forces, where I actually served as a military person, and I have two tours of duty in Australia in a small town called Rockhampton. Not sure whether you all heard of that town before. And my first job after college graduation was actually a middle school lecturer, and it was a job that lasted only 4 months because I couldn't tolerate the high level of bureaucracy. And after that, I have 3 years of cash simulation and risk management experience based out of Hong Kong. And after that, the sell side, buy side, and finally the due diligence for solar energy conglomerate. So I have been working for CFA Institute for for about 7 years, and my role span across capital market policy, ARX, society advocacy engagement, and now finally ethics training. And I also serve as a investor educator in the financial literacy with Singapore Stock Exchange, and I lecture quite a few financial modules across the Asia Pacific University. Now, my diverse mix of experience actually gave me a very different perspective to look at things. And because I am not a pure academic, but I'm also do not just thrive in the world of the finance professional. So it enabled me to look at things from different dimension. And my military experience actually gave me a very thorough understanding of how to execute things and how to handle ethical dilemma when you are in a situation where orders are paramount and the other considerations are secondary. So let me move on. Now, today, what I am going to share with you is a continuation of what my colleague Sonia Gandhi has already already shared with you, which is our ethical decision making framework workshop. And in her sharing session, she focused more on awareness and analysis of ethical dilemma situation. And my part, I'll be focusing more on how to take action. So as you can see from my background, which is a bit small right now, it actually says there to build your ethical memory muscles that you need through awareness, analysis, and action. So my focus today here will be action. First, I will actually share with you all why being genuine nowadays has become very, very crucial in the new world order, especially the ongoing pandemic has dramatically shifted and modified and forced us to live differently. And what are the practical options available when taking action to resolve ethical dilemma? And we are not talking about analysis anymore. It is when you are really dealing with ethical dilemma in real life, how should you voice out your value without antagonizing, or should I say, minimizing the antagonism of other people, offending less people, and yet you can still do a effective whistleblowing action. And I'll take all of you to look in depth into a real life case study where you'll be given the chance to vote, and I want to see how you perform and how you understand real life cases. And I will also introduce some practical framework for all of you to leverage on, which can help you to actually take the appropriate action in real life. Okay, now I would like all of you to take out your mobile phone, and if you are already on your mobile phone, you can temporarily go to your browser. I need you all to go to this website called slide.do, SLI.do, and after you go to this web page, I need you to actually log on to this event code 0916NZ. The purpose of doing so is later on when I present the case study, I will need you all to vote, and I will be demonstrating the live result from the polling, and all of you will understand how the the bulk of you actually feel which is the correct answer. So this is for later engagement and engaging portion. So go to slide.do and key in the event code 0916NZ before we proceed. I will only need you to use your mobile phone to do the polling. You don't have to view the result because I'll be showing the result here on Zoom in any case. Because I understand some of you might be using your mobile phone to actually view this webinar, so you don't have a split phone like what I'm having right now because I'm using it on my computer. Okay, without further ado, let me move on. Now, let's talk about the difference between yesterday corporations and future corporations. For those of us who are born in the age during the 1980s or before, we were often told that personal values stay at home. Or most of us are used to assume that the moment we leave our home door and show up for work, we leave behind our personal value. The moment we sit down at our typewriter or trading desk, we are not expected to speak up about the problem. And even if we have wanted to speak up, the organization that we work for would most likely not have listened, because work is work and private lives stay private. Even my mom, especially in Asia Pacific context, maybe less applicable in New Zealand and Australia, because all of you here, the cultural values is closer to the Western world culture, but I'm sure there are still some aspect of it that is still present. My mom used to tell me, when you are now going to work, and in order to make sure that you stay in the corporate ladder and climb as high as possible, you adopt this powerful teaching called MYOB, which is called Mind Your Own Business, so that I can survive in the workplace. And when I actually mentioned this among my group of close friends, it seems that most of their mom give them the same advice. It's either their mom or their father, okay? So this is the yesterday, corporation and culture. Now, move on to future generation. For those Generation Z, these are the people born after the year of 1995. They typically goes directly for self-actualization. Most of these folks, they are born to middle-class family. They have never been through famine or war, and subsistence needs such as shelter, food, etc. are often taken for granted. Now, this might seem bad, but it does have a very positive effect either, because everything in this world is actually two-sided. Okay, they are more concerned for the welfare of those around them. And this new generation of professionals, they have a strong desire to voice out inequality in their workplace. And many of them expect themselves to bring the whole self to work. And the organization that they are working for are starting to realize this. And they are also creating more opportunities for them to speak up when they see something wrong. But also, this new generation of people, they wanted to make a new impact, a big impact, but they often, or should I say, they sometimes do not know how to voice up, and they end up giving people the wrong impression that they are the vocal group, they are the unfriendly group, they are the individualistic group. Actually, this can't be further away from the truth, because many of the young people that I actually work with, once you become their friends, they will actually come and tell you, they acknowledge their inexperience. What they want is their voice to be heard. Whether or not you will be taken into consideration and utilized by corporate strategy is another story. They are willing to be taught, to be educated that their way of thinking might be wrong, but what they want is they need to be heard and they want to be honored. And this is very important, as we shall see later. Now, why did all these changes took place? There is no clear-cut answer. So today, I'm going to show you, or should I say, I will share with you two possible explanations. I always call it the white rhinoceros. Why? Because in the in the world of research right now, there's this term called white rhinoceros, which is referring to mega trend happening right now, which is obvious for almost all market participants, but which happen very slowly. Unlike black swan event, white rhinoceros are obviously there, happening very slowly, affecting everyone, but all of us can't really feel the impact because they are not happening as fast as a black swan. So today, the two white rhino factor affecting all these are what I call the age of transparency and the age of authenticity. Now, age of transparency. We are now, all of us are actually in the midst of the industrial revolution 4.0, where 5G, Internet of Things, and information flow will become very even. In this age of Internet of Things, the cost of monitoring and seeking feedback from ground becomes very cost effective. This means that the personal gadget on our body, the CCTV on the street, are able to monitor every single aspect of our life and feedback to a central system for processing, and later on distribute out the output for decision maker. Now, the flip side of this is privacy becomes a very big issue globally, not just in this part of the world. But the bright side of this is information become more flowy, more transparent, and this is totally unthinkable 10 years ago. So just look at so there are many wild business model, scattered workforce, working habit become norm because people now are able to work from home because information flow has become so thorough and so cost effective. And together with COVID-19, many die-hard working habit and culture of the past have broken up at unprecedented rate. And overnight, corporation found that, actually we don't need that big office. We can have part of our staff working from home. And that will be saving the corporation tons of rental costs. And at the same time, it also makes our staff happier because they are able to achieve work-life balance without ever leaving their house. So these are all the bright side. But for people, or should I say for people leaders who are used to using information asymmetry to maintain their power, to entrench themselves in corporation, this is bad news to them. It means that crisis once occurred will be very hard to contain. Because information gets transmitted at lightning speed, information asymmetry, those still exist in isolated pockets, are finding it harder to be maintained for long. In fact, intentional cover-up at corporate level become harder to execute, which I will demonstrate with two examples later on. And power structure within organization or typically originate from information flow was said to be flatter. And this implies that conventional corporate structure and style of working are getting obsolete. Just take one example. Mobile video recording have rendered exposure to be almost instantaneous. Mobile recording is now so pervasive that overnight, most of us individuals become frontline reporter. Just think of this. Whenever there's a sudden surprise, whether sudden surprise is good or whether is it a sudden car accident, what are the common things between the two? You will see people taking out their cell phone, their iPhone, their Samsung, what have you, to take a photo, to take a video, and immediately post them on the social media. So mobile phone has evolved to become part of our body. It's no longer just a simple tool. I'm sure many of you, or should I say most of you, would have recollect. If you leave the home one day and you forgot to take your mobile phone, you will feel totally handicapped and unable to do many things. Okay? This sort of feeling is like the mobile phone is no longer just a tool, it's part of our body. And all of us have unknowingly become living CCTV, like it or not. So this means that self-serving corporate culture, people who like to entrench themselves using information asymmetry, but where in reality are very inefficient in terms of execution, are finding it hard to maintain themselves. And as a person leader, whether or not you are ready, the above environmental changes have arrived. So you either adapt, change yourself, and go and go with the big flow, or you risk being replaced and out of job. Okay. So to be honest, when people talk to me, the rise of AI is going to create a lot of job losses. I'm actually not too concerned. What I'm too concerned for them is if you belong to the group where you want to entrench yourself through using information asymmetry, but are not willing to become more efficient and learn new things, then you are in risk. But for those of us who are willing to evolve and adopt a more transparency working habit or working culture, it will be very, very good news for us. In fact, I see someone raising his hand. Okay. Yeah. You want to voice up? Okay, maybe I should continue. You can actually type your question on the, we have a Q&A on Zoom, so you can type your Q&A there and I will be able to hear from you. Yeah, because I don't think you are able to voice up directly. Okay, let me continue first. So let's go through one example of transparency revolution. As you all can see from the slide, the company I'm talking about is Wells Fargo. On 22nd April 2018, Wells Fargo's, a very big bank in America, was fined USD 1 billion for a series of fraudulent operations involving 2 million fictitious customer accounts. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau found Wells Fargo responsible for creating more than 2 million fake accounts. And the investment went very public. And it was discovered that ever since 2016 onwards, Wells Fargo staff had begun creating fake customer care and housing loan to fulfill their individual KPI. And this is very shocking because Wells Fargo is not a small community bank. It's a very big, too big to fail enterprise on US soil. And all this have occurred despite Wells Fargo's too big to fail status. And what happened is the entire investigation, from case filing till court hearing until verdict, occurred in a relatively short period of time, less than 2 years, and the scope of disclosure had been very transparency. Now, this is totally unthinkable 10 years ago, where typically the corporate scandal of this scale, whenever possible, the stakeholder would try to suppress it to make it appear smaller. And if it is a regional scandal or a zonal scandal, they will try their way to maneuver it to make it non-existent. And if they can't cover this up, most of the time they will try to delay information release disclosure so much so that it becomes diluted in the world of media. But this time round, they can't do so. Okay. In fact, there have even been no attempt to find a few junior scapegoats to come out and to actually resolve the issue, because many senior management were actually prosecuted in this case. So the entire episode demonstrated that a new era has arrived. Information flow very fast, cover-up is very tough, and this is testimonial of what is to come. Now, the second case would be the rise and spectacular fall of Uber, which not too long ago, Uber once again hit the headlines. And this time, it wasn't for any record-breaking refinancing, nor was it due to any state-of-the-art technology. What happened was it was up in the news for an embarrassing sexual harassment incident. Okay. the entire story, all of you can Google, and I'm sure all of you have heard about it. One of the newly hired staff, her name was Susan J. Fowler. She was an engineer. On the first day when she went to work for Uber, on the company internal chat room, she received a message from a senior person who explicitly sought obvious sexual flavor from her, and she find that this is 100% thorough direct sexual harassment. So she actually brought up this issue with the HR, and what happened actually shocked her a lot. Not only does Uber HR actually admit that this belongs to sexual harassment, and they actually reprimanded the person who initiated this, the senior engineer. But in view of the fact that this senior engineer was a high performer, the company decided not to pursue this method further, and they say that because he did not do it all the time, this is his first time, he's a first-time offender, they actually pledged Susan not to pursue this any further. Susan was thoroughly shocked, and she did not let this go. And interestingly, within 24 hours of occurrence, the entire episode was on social media. Okay. And what happened next is that it was a PR disaster for Uber, followed by the share price collapse and eventually the dismissal of the related party, which is that senior engineer. And this did not stop. More importantly, the entire episode eventually grew bigger. People began to question what is actually happening in Uber. Are they pursuing corporate benefits, profit growth, regardless of any ESG consideration, to the point of sacrificing basic protection for their staff? And it actually eventually gravitated towards the stepping down of Uber CEO. Now, this incident once again consciously reminds us of the lightning speed of modern news dissemination. Even if a company like Uber, which is a new kid on the block, which thrive on world-class technology, riding the tech boom, are unspared of this. So other more conventional company, the situation can't be better. Okay, so this is the first white rhino factor, the dawn of the transparency revolution. Let's take a look at another, our second white rhino. I call it the age of authenticity. Now, in recent years, one example is General Electric actually made the decision to start leadership education and top-level ESG policy making training available to new hire for those who are being hired for the first 6 months. All of you might think, why does GE making it compulsory for newly hired to be trained in leadership, particularly ESG policy making? Are they trying to groom young leaders? Yes, part of the reason, but it's not the main reason. In fact, what GE is trying to do is to get this young hire, new employee, to thoroughly understand how top leadership make decisions, make policy changes related to ESG, to make them understand the thought process, the flow process, so that they can get the buy-in of their junior employee when eventually they come to executing policy related to ESG. And in fact, this is very much in line with the latest trend where the Generation Z people actually aspire for a career where workplace value join up with their personal value. Because a new study have revealed that the number of people, when they evaluate which company they want to join, which company they want to work for, and who they want to invest with, so whether you are a job seeker or an investor, they typically base their perception of on an organizational value and purpose. So it's no longer looking for the most profitable company to work with so that you can get a higher pay, or to invest in so that you can get a better stock price, but to also find a company to work for, to invest in, that align with your personal value. And this new generation of people, we call them Gen Z, they need workplace value to jar with their personal value. And perhaps more than any generation before, they have high aspiration of what they want in life, and they have very clear-cut understanding of what they want. So they hope to work for an environment where their superior, the entire company, can actually be their how shall I say acknowledger and recognize their effort, and they can grow in resonance. So talent acquisition, and together with the rise of ESG lately, means that corporation, when they want to retain top talent, they need to generate enough social value to convince employee. In other words, if they want to retain and when they want to recruit and retain the very best, the very bright people, employer must talk about creating social value and clearly demonstrate that their day-to-day work is related to that broader purpose. So if you just look around you, whether is it green product, green financing, green bond, or impact investing, recent years have been very, very hot, and it's not just a hype. Now, purely boilerplate support for ESG by the conventional corporation typically will not work anymore. Top management cannot just say that, oh, we are subscribing to ESG, we have built an ESG community, but taking no action. Top management needs to demonstrate clearly how the company vision can navigate the daily needs, the daily tasks of employee towards a greater social cause. Employee need to see action done, need management to show them the meaning of their work. So the age of authenticity, together with the age of transparency, are the two white rhinos that have brought about this big change in mindset among people. It's very hard to ascertain which is the cause, which is the effect, but all these changes are coming. So now, after sharing with you the big broad background, especially these two white rhino effect, let me briefly take you through to the 3 course of action we can take when we are faced with ethical dilemma. So I have more or less assumed that you have gone through our previous part 1 courses where we talk about awareness and analysis, and I will take you straight through to action. So at the crossroad of ethical dilemma, what option do we have? Well, you have 3 choices. You can choose to remain silent. When you look at ethical dilemma that doesn't concern you, you adopt the mind your own business approach and you remain silent. Second, you can choose to avoid it, change to a new team, or quit your job. And the third one, you can opt to voice out, make known the ethical dilemma, and find ally to work with you to resolve it and make the world around you a better place. Now, voicing out one's values at times can actually be a sensitive affair. After all, when you suspect your colleague, one of your colleagues, is potentially engaging in some unethical act, you felt obligated to voice out, but at the same time finding it tough to do so. Why? Because many a time, in fact, this is actually the option of most people. Most people actually opt to stay silent. After all, the less you voice out, the less risk you take on. And the less thing you voice out, less argument. And if you voice out and you eventually found that it was a misunderstanding, you end up offending your colleague. and you make a new enemy at work. Also, even if you have voiced out, no one might add on it, and you will just be labeled as the nasty person. So if most of us opt to remain silent, with time, this overly silence culture will actually lead to consequences. On the individual level, if you behave this way long enough, it will lead to what we call long-term suppression of your self-value, leading you to lose interest or passion in your work. At a corporate level, if this silence culture remains pervasive, it will actually lead to a lot of unethical happening, flourishing, and sooner or later, it will boomerang to affect all of us. And a lot of things which seems to be small unethical act right at the start might mushroom to become very big and uncontrollable. Paper, after all, cannot cover up fire. Well, you can also opt for the second option. Since you feel that keeping silence is not a long-term issue, how about avoidance? Now, avoidance have two types. The first type can be a big move like resignation, or it can be a small, less dramatic action like request to switch to a new team, which may not be possible all the time. But regardless of which approach you choose in terms of avoidance, there are consequences and there are side effects. First of all, most of us have worked ourselves very hard to build the current working network and working relationship. And the moment you resign or switch to a new team, all this valuable human network that you establish might not be usable anymore. So many a times, like the silence option, avoidance is not an optimal choice, which is why we have the third option, typically adopted by a minor group of people. They will choose to voice out. And first of all, voicing out doesn't mean launching a full-fledged attack on the target audience, on the target colleague. After all, it might be a beautiful misunderstanding that that colleague of yours, he or she might not actually be engaging in unethical act. Your suspicions might have been wrong. So in these cases, you should not directly launch a full-fledged attack. Besides directly voicing it out, there are lots of other alternative ways to do it. Like for instance, more engaging dialogue, think from the other person's perspective, strategize your series of action, do more data digging, find the right audience, right allies, form an alliance, etc. None of this method is foolproof, and it has to be customized to the different contexts of each different ethical dilemma or suspicious case of unethical act. Now, I have talked so much. Let's go through a real-life example, which I will be giving you the chance to actually cast your vote. And I would like all of us to openly discuss this if possible, after I show you the case. Susan Fox was a newly hired financial analyst at a leading Wall Street bank. The bank had just been through major turnover, and many of her peers and her supervisors were new too. Now, Susan was beginning to understand the various clients and portfolio on the team. She realized there was a serious backlog of work. Basic client status documentation had not been updated for months, and regular client meetings had been pushed back, and there seems to be a never-ending influx of phone calls from clients asking for update. Because many of her ex-colleagues have left the company, so many of her existing colleagues are new. So Susan spent her first 2 weeks on the job trying to get each client portfolio back on track. During her third week, one fine day, Susan's supervisor suddenly asked her to drop everything and focus on one specific portfolio, because her supervisor would be having a meeting with this client on that afternoon. Now, when Susan looked at the numbers, it was clear to her that this client had suffered massive losses, and these losses could directly be attributed to the recent changes, because no one was taking care of this client portfolio and no one was executing the supposedly portfolio rebalancing for him. And she also noticed that this client portfolio was actually not that big compared to the other firm major clients. That said, however, this client was a very good friend of one of their senior partner, so it is a cause for concern for her supervisor. Now, Susan figured out most likely that her supervisor was looking for her help in breaking the bad news to the client in their meeting. But to her surprise, Susan's supervisor instead was actually asking her to change the number, to amend the number, to revise the number and benchmark in the portfolio so they would look impressive in front of the client. Susan did not say anything first and took over the work as she returned to her desk. She told herself, if she had been at the firm longer, she thought it would be easier to put her foot down and tell her boss, that her supervisor, that this was unethical. But because she was new, she did not want to make a bad impression or worse, get fired, just because she refused to do what her supervisor wanted. However, she also questioned herself and say whether this would be okay to just fudge the number just once, especially when she was so tied up with work, there isn't much bandwidth left. But there was no gray area in her mind. She knows that if she changed this number, not only would it go against her better judgment, it will be a violation of the bank code of ethics and professional standard. And she kept thinking of the client, a retired gentleman who saw this portfolio as his legacy for his children and grandchildren. Her heart is torn. What would you do if you were to be in Susan's shoe? A, would you actually ask a colleague what they would do in this situation based on experience, trying to gather information from how senior handle this sort of unethical dilemma? She feels that this is definitely not the first time the company has encountered such issue. B, directly tell his supervisor this is unethical and refuse to do it. C, override her supervisor, go right to his boss and explain the situation, but risk antagonizing her supervisor. D, tell her supervisor that she will adjust the number, but do not actually do so, and purposely let it end up letting the client think the truth. E, tell the supervisor that she is not comfortable with the request, but also take full use of this opportunity to look good in front of the supervisor, telling him that she is sacrificing her integrity and doing him a favor just this once. Now, please turn to your Slido poll. I've already opened up the polling and cast your vote. And for those of you who are not still not sure of where to, you are starting coming in. Okay, remember the vote is on slide.do. Okay, and once you reach slide.do, the website, the code that you should key in is 0916NZ. 0916NZ. So I received 26 votes so far. Let me turn to the Slido. Let me open up the, okay, and share with you this. Okay, as you all can see, wow, I have very surprising result coming in. So most of you actually choose to override your supervisor and go on to your supervisor boss and explain the situation. And while 43% of you, okay, now you have flipped around. Okay, basically most of you either override your boss and go to complain to your boss, or you simply refuse to do so, tell your boss directly. 5% of you actually say that you will adjust a number, but actually not doing so, so end up landing your boss in trouble. A very small percentage of you actually ask a colleague for advice, and a very small percentage of you would actually make use of this opportunity to gain favor with your client, sorry, with your bosses. Okay, seems to me like New Zealand, from this small sample of polling, is a very good place for me to find a work to work in, because I'm a very ethical person. Obviously, I have to be, and I will not have this kind of problem. And people here are very direct, and I can also be very direct. Nice culture. Yeah. Okay. As the poll are coming in, I will show the final polls result later. But let's see how Susan react in real life. You will be very, very surprised of how she deal with it. Okay. And this is where the beauty of this engaging sharing session actually comes in. Okay, let me go back to the slides. Okay, now, what did Susan do? Okay, first, Susan adopted our option A, whereby she actually asked one of her colleagues, a gentleman who actually worked longer in that firm, and briefly explained to him what was going on. She asked him if she was missing something. He thought of it, and he actually agreed that this was not unacceptable. Sorry, this was not acceptable. This was unethical. And he just said, "Oh, I'm so glad that I'm not the one facing it." So, by asking her colleague of this, it was not very much of helpful. He did not give her any useful advice. Okay. Thinking about her own career as well as the integrity of the firm, she did not think it would work to just run into her supervisor office and say that his request was ethically wrong. Okay. After all, he might just turn to her colleague and ask him to do it. So you see, Susan thinking is not just to solve the ongoing problem or finding ways to pass on this problem to another one. She genuinely intended to help the poor gentleman, but at the same time, not to antagonize other people. So when she had that kind of thinking in mind, it actually shaped her strategy and constrained her and prevented her from directly bashing into her supervisor office, accusing him that this is unethical wrong, because she knows that if you do that, most probably the supervisor could just say, okay, you don't do it, never mind, you go back to your work, I will take this back. And that old gentleman, that client position will not be benefited, and the problem will still be there, even though it's no longer her problem. So you see, this is a very high level perspective that Susan is adopting. It's not just for herself, and this is the beauty of it. So Susan devised an alternative plan. Susan told her supervisor that she could not change the benchmark convincingly, but instead she would provide an analysis to explain the portfolio underperformance at each point, line by line, and show how they are going to address each issue going forward. So she's trying to test, indirectly providing an alternative solution to her supervisor, and after that, observe how her supervisor react. And to her surprise, her supervisor was fine with it. So it turned out that her supervisor was not committed to being unethical. He was simply being afraid of having a difficult or embarrassing conversation with the client. And he thought changing the number was the only way out. But Susan had provided a successful alternative that they were both comfortable with. Okay? So this case is a happy ending story, win-win situation for all parties involved, be it the client, the supervisor, or Susan. Okay, let's look back at the final result. Okay, so most of you would just directly bash into the room and tell the supervisor that this is wrong, while the second majority of you would override and go up and escalate the thing to the situation to your superior. Okay, fine. Okay, let's go back. So now this can't be more appropriate. So based on what all of you have responded, I'm very sure we can learn a lot from these case studies. First of all, we have to learn to realize that in most ethical dilemma instances, we typically have multiple options. Never constrain yourself to one flow of thought. We must try our best to broaden our domain, our scope of consideration, so that we can find out more way of handling it. And never pre-label the target person as an unethical individual. And this is very important. Susan actually still give the benefit of the doubt that her supervisor is not intentionally trying to be unethical. Sometimes it might be for some unknown reason that person allowed him or herself to slip down the road of unethical practice. Sometimes it is very understandable, but I'm not saying that this is wrong. This is correct, but we have to try our best to understand the context first before we design our next course of action. Always provide an opportunity for the other party to explain his or her behavior. Don't put down your judgment too early. But of course, in doing so, you have to protect yourself. Because if you directly question that person, if it is indeed an unethical act, that might actually give him or her a pre-warning, and that will give him or her a chance to backfire onto you. So you also have to protect yourself. Okay, I see a question coming in. Well, she come up with an alternative. Her boss' intention were unethical. Yeah, correct. So in this case, one of the reply that one of you give is that while in this case, Susan did come up with an alternative, the action done by her boss was actually unethical. Yeah, it's true. So in this case, her boss knows this unethical, but he still do it. And by Susan's action, Susan is actually questioning, is actually giving her boss a chance to remediate the situation. Kelly, I think someone has raised her hand. Are we allowing the audience to voice out directly, verbally? Kelly?
Hi, we can try.
Okay. Macy, I saw you raising your hand. Will you want to speak up? Macy? Okay. If you want to speak up, please raise your hand again. You can unmute yourself to speak up. Okay, I will go on first. Try to think from the counterparty perspective. Very important. Number 4, try to attempt to extract more information from engaging dialogue. Talk to more people. Indirectly talk to the person involved. Try to find out more. Sometimes indirect approach is better, especially when you have the luxury of time to do it. In this case, Susan doesn't have much time, but she's also able to do it. But in most circumstances, we will have time to react. A few days, a week, try to talk to more people, talk to more related people, get more information. And obviously, think out of the box, very important. And last but not least, try your best ability to stay objective. So I have already demonstrated to you a living case study for you to actually see how to handle this sort of taking real life action. If you are actually keen to learn more of how to do it, we actually have an online courses called Giving Voice to Value. And the example I took out from here is from one of the modules. That course is a cohort-based courses, which means a group of people would be signing up for it, and they would actually do it on a group basis, and they will exchange ideas. There will be gamification features. If any of you are keen, please drop an email to Kelly, and she will come back to me and we will arrange for it. Okay. So someone was asking me, so sir, what was the correct option? In this case, there's no such thing as a correct option because this was a case in real life. We are just trying to discuss the various options available. It's not an exam questions. And what Susan did was she attempted option A first. It doesn't work, so she actually come up with a think out of the box question. So if you were to ask me for a correct option, I would say you opt for option A first. Check with the people, your colleague, how to handle this kind of case, and if it can't work, then you try to find out other ways as what Susan did. Definitely what Susan did was just one alternative. There could be thousands of others ways you could have done it. Okay. Now, for those of you who are looking for case study with exact correct option where the other 3 are wrong, don't worry, I have one more case study later. That one would have a correct option. Okay, we'll come to that. So let me pass you some recommended framework to handle ethical dilemma. Because today, due to the time shortage, I cannot be going through more comprehensive case study. I hope the one that I engage with you all is quite comprehensive, in depth. Okay. So we have the Giving Voice to Value framework, the CFA Institute Ethical Decision Making framework, and some evergreen lifelong wisdom. I would actually go through all this in moderate depth. First, GVV, Giving Voice to Value. Giving Voice to Value have 5 key undertaking. First, it requires you to know your personality. So once you take the course of GVV, it will enable you to understand your own personality so that before you make any strategic action, you need to know which value are most important to you. And understanding your own strength and weakness are paramount. For instance, whether you are an introvert, an extrovert, a risk-averse or risk-taking person. Voicing can be done through talking, writing, action, or even private strategizing, depending on your personality. For people who are more introvert, writing or even private strategizing might be more suitable. But for people who are more extrovert, maybe creatively talking, dialogue will be more suitable. So the goal is to find out, firstly, the form that fits your unique strength and situation which you are more comfortable with. And guess what? Some of us can be extrovert in front of our peers, but introvert in front of our superior. So things can change, okay? Sometimes behavior is also highly contextualized. The other aspect that GVV taught is you have to obtain a firm grasp of how information flow within your organization. Because if you when you're examining the implicit value of where we work, such as how portfolio are managed in this example, who gets promoted, and how the organization treat client when they are not paying attention, you can develop an honest understanding of the priority and value of the organization, even when they contradict the explicitly stated value. In other words, don't look at the value or mission statement point blank. Observe how your organizational function, make decision, analyze things. That is where the real corporate culture lies. Understanding this tendency and contradiction, that means try to understand what company, organization says and what they do. From the mismatch, you will be able to understand more about how information flows. Third step, erect your voice. Voicing our value is not easy. And we often hear a long list of reason and rationalization why a particular course of action, which is actually wrong, have been made correct. Like for instance, Susan's supervisor in our case, he intrinsically know that fudging the numbers are wrong. But yet, he actually contemplated doing it, and his rationalization, his excuse is, I'm busy, this client is a good friend of our big boss, we shouldn't antagonize him, I got no time, the money is lost, so I think, but he's not a financial expert, so perhaps I fudge the number, he go back happily, then while he go back happily, I try to do my best to manage his portfolio, make the money back, and all this will be over. He is thinking along this track. He is finding reason to justify his unethical act. And he thinks that he can control the situation, which in fact is very risky, because ultimately, if things go off, the entire team will be affected. So people tend to be loop-sided when they try to make unethical act. It is not because they are committed to doing it. Although there are certain instances where people downright want to commit unethical act to benefit himself or herself. For those kind of situations, then the best way will be to whistleblow, blah, blah, blah. But we are not talking about those kind of absolute situations. We're talking about situations where we can still pull that person back or find a middle ground to resolve all the ethical dilemma. Okay? And erecting your core value is very important, because the old saying is that those of us who doesn't have any value will fall for everything. And second last but not least, practice. You need to repetitively practice with precision. In fact, this can't be more correct. Whichever framework you learn, you need to have the opportunity to repeatedly practice it, either through role-playing or to learn from mistakes, because what doesn't kill you will make you stronger. Okay. In fact, when I actually paid for a course to make me a better speaker, I paid a lot of money. But my trainer actually tell me, in order for me to make you a better speaker, I only meet you once per week. You have to practice what I taught you every day for at least 10 minutes, day in, day out. So the same goes for ethical behavior. You need to practice on a regular basis so that it becomes part of your muscle memory. So that next time you came across the same ethical dilemma or similar ethical dilemma, your body reacts to it without going through your brain. It is your spinal cord that is controlling the series of action. And that's what we call muscle memory. And you have to, lastly but not least, think strategically. Think of the consequences of action A, B, C, D individually, and think of better way to do. And sometimes the correct action might not be one, it might be a sequence. Maybe doing A first, and if A doesn't work, then do B, then B doesn't work, then do D, etc. So thinking strategically is key as well. So the detail of this is in a nutshell what is the whole concept of GVB. And in our GVB program, you will see the detail of this. The other one that I can introduce you is our CFA EDM framework, ethical decision making framework, where we talk about in front of ethical dilemma, these are the 4 steps to follow. Number 1 is to identify the ethical dilemma, what are the sources of the problem, and the related code of standards, code of ethics and professional standards that we can refer to. Number 2, give enough consideration to the environment, to the context, to the personality, and consider different approaches, possible approaches. Number 3, no matter how much planning you take, how much consideration you make, you have to add on it, you have to take action. Okay. And number 4, reflect upon your action. And as I mentioned before, what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. So this, in a nutshell, is our ethical decision-making framework. And if any of you are keen, you can go and Google EDM CFA Institute, and you can download this PDF copy. And for those of you who are genuinely keen to make this part of your muscle memory, I have a very nice mouse pad of this. I can actually find a way to ship them to Kelly, and Kelly can actually ship them to you if she has the individual mailing budget to do so. I don't have a mouse pad. So Kelly, please remind me if any of our folks here wants a mouse pad with this, so that you can see our ethical decision-making framework every day when you are working using your mouse. Okay, so let's go through another case, and this case is a pandemic-related case to test out your skill set that you have learned so far. Burlingame is a high-ranking government official who, because of her work with the intelligence branch, is regularly briefed through on potential threats to the country, both military and economic. She received information from the intelligence community about the strong likelihood of the onset of a global pandemic in the next 3 months. She recognizes that the pandemic will result in widespread economic shock and have a devastating negative impact on global capital markets. Burlingame contacts O'Donnell, her investment advisor, direct him to liquidate her investment. How should Donnell react? Should Donnell sell the investment as directed by the client, not execute the trade as they are a product of material non-public information? Remember, I think it's not mentioned in this case, but Donnell is a CFA charter holder. Refuse to execute the trade as Burlingame request is not in line with her previously established investment policy statement. D, execute the trade, but disclose any possible illegal activity to appropriate authorities. E, none of the above. So I've opened up the polling. Please cast your vote. Okay, remember, we have to view this question in the context of the information release. That means you have to base your answer on whatever information you have got from the questions. Please cast your vote on Slido. There is a correct answer in this case, okay? Unlike the previous in-depth case study that we do, this one has a correct answer. I'm seeing 7 votes. How about the rest of you? Still thinking? Well, this is not a very easy case. And for example, even though this is not an exam question, but the quality of it, the stringentness of it can be like can actually be up to the standard of an exam. Yeah. So any of you have any? Oh, sorry. Q&A, you can answer it. How would a candidate answer this question on a CFA exam? Scott Rainey, you just asked me a question on how would a candidate answer this question on the CFA exam. Well, as I mentioned, for the previous case that we do, the one involving Susan, that case cannot be an exam question because there's no exact answer. But for this case, there's an exact question. And later on, as I explain this pandemic case, I will show you how a candidate would answer this question on a CFA exam. But please bear in mind, this is not a CFA exam question, nor was it used before. If it was used before, I will not be able to use this as a case for you. Okay, 24 of you. The rest of you, let me check. Okay, count. Let me show you the answer right now. Sorry, let me show you the polling situation right now. Okay, I have released. Okay, as you have seen, okay, most of you actually choose option D. Execute the trade but disclose any possible illegal activity to the authority. The second majority of you do not execute the trade as they are a product of material non-public information. Well, these two are contenders. A, and the third most favorite group is sell the investment as directed by the client. And obviously only a minority choose E, none of the above. Now, while the polling is still going on, let me continue with the slides to explain. The circumstances of this case indicate that Burlingame is seeking to liquidate her investment based on material non-public information, right? This is ascertained. Because of her position in the government, the information that she holds is material non-public. CFA Standard of Professional Conduct, Standard 2, Clause A, state that material non-public information prohibit any CFA Institute member who possess them from acting or causing others to act on them. Obviously, the information on the oncoming pandemic is both material and non-public. It is considered material because it will affect security prices if a reasonable investor knows it. It is non-public because it was not widely distributed to the investing public yet. Okay, this part is sure. And clearly, Burlingame is in possession of such material non-public information. And the fact of the question already clearly pointed out that Burlingame did try to trade on this information to avoid losses of the portfolio, hence benefiting herself. However, the key of this question is, should O'Donnell execute the trade for her? Now, the key question is, did O'Donnell knows all this? There is no indication that Donnell actually knows that Burlingame is acting on it based on the fact that it was based on material non-public information. So since O'Donnell doesn't know this is based on non-public information, material non-public information, B is not correct. O'Donnell should not execute the trade as they are a product of material non-public information is out because she's not aware. Now, CFA is, how about the other options, C and D? CFA Institute Standard 3, Clause E, preservation of confidentiality, would have allowed Donnell to disclose illegal activity on the part of Burlingame to the respective authority. However, there is no indication within the question that Donnell is aware that Burlingame is in fact trading on material non-public information. Unless, of course, if Donnell knows that Burlingame is a government official and there are certain protocols to follow to find out before she can execute the game for Burlingame, but the question did not indicate so. So D is also wrong because Donia do not know or cannot detect any possible illegal activity. Now, even though based on Burlingame initial investment policy statement or initial setting, executing this trade is against the investment policy statement, but Burlingame is personally overwriting it and giving very explicit instruction for Donia to exercise this trade. And it is, as a CFA charter holder, it is Donia duty to client to execute whatever the client instruct her to do so. So C refused to execute the trade purely because Burlingame request is not in line with her previously established investment objective, mandate, and constraint, is also wrong. And therefore, based on the analysis, the correct answer should be A. Sell the investment as directed by the client, because in this case, Donia does not know the material non-public information nature behind the scene. And there was no indication at all that suggests that whatever been done was illegal. And Burlingame has all the right to override the initial investment policy statement set up. So that is how you should tackle an exam question. So how many of you have got it right? Let's do a last check. A, 20% of you have got it right. Okay, congratulations to those of you who got it right. 1/5 of you. Let's move on to our last part. So I have introduced to you all the GVV framework and our ethical decision-making framework. And last but not least, let me bring you through some basic, evergreen, lifelong wisdom. First, when we are facing an unethical dilemma situation, ask yourself, if the act or any option you choose is undesirable on you, never do it to others. Thou shall not do it to others if you does not want it to happen to you. Basic common sense. Birds of a feather flocks together. If you are constantly working with a gang of colleagues or people who are used to behaving unethically, it's just a matter of time you will slip down the slope. Avoid the wrong people, mix with the more ethical people. This is a long-term measure. We are human beings. Emotionally, we can influence one another. So, beware. You are who you are because of the people you mix with. Thirdly, if you always stroke by the riverside, your feet are bound to get wet. Now, this is obvious. In the Susan case, if the superior successfully fudged the number and managed to placate the old gentleman client, he might get away with it this time, but he will then be more confident and do it a second, third, fourth time to other clients. Bound to be one day he will be caught. And when that happens, the consequences will be dramatic. Okay, so I hope these are common sense wisdom that all of us can adhere to. Okay, with that, I end my presentation today.